Good evening. I'm Pat DeLue. Welcome to Boston College and this event, sponsored by the Church in the 21st Century Initiative. I'm delighted to introduce John O'Malley of the Society of Jesus, Distinguished Professor of Church History at the Weston School of Theology. John is the real thing. Author or editor of 13 books, some multi-volume, one translated into 7 languages, including Braille, 2 more books in press, winner of numerous Best Book Awards, author of over 100 articles, among his many other honors, a fellow since 1995 of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. And on a personal note, and as many of you here know, John is a great teacher. 35 years ago, an undergraduate at the University of Detroit, where Father O'Malley was a faculty member in the history department, enrolled in his Italian Renaissance course. She liked it so much that she later took Father O'Malley's seminar on St. Augustine. Watching a master at work convinced this then young woman to become an historian herself, though now just a part-time one. I owe Father O'Malley a great deal. John has recently turned his attention from the 16th century to the Second Vatican Council. He joins us this evening to discuss his views of Vatican II in a slightly unusual question and answer format. For the first part of this evening's presentation, I will ask Father O'Malley some questions, and then I'll open the floor for you to ask the questions that I should have asked. So let's begin. John, how and why did you begin writing on Vatican II?
That's a very good question. My field is 16th century Italy, and especially the whole problem of reform of the church, so the Protestant Reformation, Council of Trent, and so forth. So I happened to be in Rome in 1963 to 65 writing my dissertation, and that was when the council was in session. So this caught my attention, of course, and engaged me very closely. And at the same time, I was writing a dissertation on this whole idea of reform of the church. So with the Aggiornamento of Vatican II, what's going on in that council, what was going on in the 16th century, so trying to compare these two realities, the past and the present, got me going. And then when I finished my dissertation and went out into the workforce, that was just after the council, and I'd just been ordained and just finished my degree. So I was caught up in the whirlwind of Vatican II and the aftermath of Vatican II. And as I tell people, I wasn't at that council. I didn't write those documents. But in my generation of some people here, the council was dropped in our lap. And so I had all kinds of questions about what was going on. So that's basically how I got started.
There's been so much written recently about Vatican II from a variety of vantage points. How is the book that you're working on now about Vatican II different from the approach taken by so many other of our contemporaries?
Well, as you know, I mean, the amount of literature on Vatican II is almost overwhelming. I mean, beginning in the 1960s when the council was in session, then for the next 5 or 6 or 7 years, and then there's been another spate of it recently because of the anniversaries. I mean, the 40th anniversary of the opening of the council. Now we're moving towards the 40th anniversary of the closing of the council. So there's been a tremendous amount most of it's been done by theologians or by participants in the council, and most of them have sort of taken one aspect or another and especially dealt with the meaning and interpretation of specific documents in the council. So what I'm trying to do is to write a relatively short book, which I'm tentatively calling Vatican II, History and Interpretation. So what I want to do is give kind of a brief narrative of the council, what happened there, and then give some of my ideas about the problem of interpreting it and what I think are some clues as to how to go about interpreting it. What do we have out there? I mean, for all that's written on Vatican II, in English, and I think this is by and large true of most languages, there are only sort of two books that are really right on the button when it comes to the history of the Council. And one is that old workhorse, Xavier Rin's Vatican II, which, as you know, was originally a series of articles in the New Yorker, later published during the Council, later published as a book, and just recently republished. It's old now, it's biased, it's gossipy. The basic narrative is okay, however, but it's confusing. It's because it was a series of articles. The other thing is this 5-volume history of the Council, which will be completed in English this fall by the general editor is a man by the name of Giuseppe Alberigo, an Italian historian. It's a wonderful monument. It's each volume is about like that, multiple authors. For most people, I fear it will tell you more about the Council than you want to know. And it's also multi-authored, so although Alberigo supplies a good thread of continuity, it doesn't have a, sort of a one, what you get from having one author's point of view. So I think my book, with a little luck, will fill a gap and provide something that's not present in English.
In the current debate about the meaning of Vatican II, can you characterize the main thrusts, the conservative versus liberal, the Dulles versus O'Malley, the Oakes versus O'Malley? What are the different vantage points that people are taking these days on Vatican II?
It's funny you should mention those names. One reason we have this format tonight that we have is because this evening was originally conceived as a kind of debate between, especially a member named Edward Oakes, who's a Jesuit who sort of disagrees with my approach to the Council, and myself. But I guess he kind of anticipated it was going to be such a bad evening, so he couldn't make it. But this is not original with me. This is, I think most people would say that right now, where are we in the interpretation of Vatican II? I think there are three sort of main trends. There's a very small but vociferous group who would just as soon believe or hope that Vatican II didn't happen, indeed that it was an aberration, that somehow or other the Holy Spirit was absent, that what they're really waiting for, and I guess somewhere in the United States there is a Pope Pius XIII, at least that's so I've heard, and then kind of gradations off of that. So that's kind of one extreme. The most people, and this is, I think, sort of a semi-official, at least semi-official interpretation, is, yes, Vatican II was an authentic council, but it really didn't sort of change things very much. It didn't want to change things very much. And it's in deep, deep, deep continuity with the Council of Trent in the 16th century, the First Vatican Council in the 19th century, and put it one way, it's kind of a blip on the ecclesiastical screen. Then there's my view, and view of not just mine, but some others. And my view is, no, Vatican II, at least in its intent and in its inner dynamic, was something more radical. That it was certainly radically in continuity with the past. I mean, we're Christians, right? We're Catholics, right? And I'm a historian, right? I mean, the continuities are deeper than the discontinuities. No contest, yes. But that significant changes were intended and implicit in the council, and that we really have to take account of those if we're going to understand it. So.
Intended, do you think, by whom?
Well, I think it was, good question. First of all, I think there's two levels. One level is sort of looking at, or you might almost say aside from any individuals or any group's intention, sort of looking at the momentum of the event and of the dynamism of the event and of the documents. There is where I think on one level you find a sort of a move towards a significant change, significant changes, and so forth. That's one level. Then I think another level is with the so-called progressives in the council, that they were, well, one approach I take, one thing we have to look at is what I call the long 19th century. The various papal pronouncements, ecclesiastical stance of the 19th century, which I take going from the French Revolution up really to the eve of the council, that the progressives in the council or the majority in the council, wanted to reverse or radically modify those positions. But one of the problems, I mean, Vatican II is not easy to interpret. I mean, the fact that there are these different interpretations of Vatican II and so forth, it's quite understandable. I mean, it's not easy to interpret. And one reason, just one reason why it's difficult to interpret, is because the so-called progressives in the council, those who were kind of looking for a change, kept sort of saying, well, we're really not changing that much. We're basically in continuity with the Catholic tradition. I think they were, the big Catholic tradition, but that was their line. Whereas the minority, sometimes called the conservatives or the recalcitrants, they were the ones who said, no, you're really changing things. And they were terrified, and they were adamant, they were passionate about not having these documents and the direction of the council go the direction it went. I mean, I think in that regard, they were more on the mark and more honest, maybe, than the others. So.
You've written about the difference in style of Vatican II. And from your vantage point as an historian, can you say something about what that style of Vatican II was, and how does it differ from the great councils of the past? I mean, even Dulles concedes that you're right about style.
Yeah. So I talk about the style of the council. Ho-hum. I mean, who cares about style, right? I mean, this is ornament, you know, you have a nice jacket or something like this. I mean, of course, that's completely wrong, right? I mean, the style is the man. The style is the person. The analogy I use is myself. What is John O'Malley? He's a human being, he's a priest, he's a Jesuit, he's a historian, tells you a lot. How about my style? How is John O'Malley? He's kind, he's intelligent, he's passionate. That's the person. I mean, that's how you get at it. I mean, style is, in that sense, the ultimate expression of personality and reality. So the issue at Vatican II, it seems to me, is the style of the church. How is the church? How does it operate? What is its modus, its M.O.? This is its style. Is it authoritarian? Is it top-down? Is it punishing? Is it whatever? Or is it collegial? Is it across the board? And so forth. So that's the issue of style. So here, when you look at this problem of interpreting Vatican II, what do you run into? You run into one group, And I'd say maybe that's that group that I'm talking about there in the more or less in the center saying, well, Vatican II wasn't changing too much. And look, it says, here's what it says in this passage. Here's what it says in this passage. Here's what it says in this passage. And see, Vatican II keeps reiterating that it's not changing things, that it's in continuity with the past. And that's correct. But what we need is a whole different approach to interpreting the council, so that we're not just looking at individual paragraphs or individual lines or individual statements, but that we're looking at these documents as totalities and in their specific literary genre. Right? You don't interpret a poem the way you interpret a city ordinance. So, what happens with Vatican II? What's really the first thing that strikes you with Vatican II when you kind of pick up the book? It's a big book. As a matter of fact, the 16 final documents of Vatican II, the official documents of Vatican II, they are almost twice as long as the documents of the Council of Trent. And the documents of Vatican II and Trent together are as long as all the other 19 councils put together. So, business as usual? It's a long-winded way of saying business as usual. So how do you interpret these documents? And that's where I think Vatican II is so unique and so special. What are or what were ecumenical councils? The Catholic Church counts 21, right? Officially 21 ecumenical councils. The first one is the Council of Nicaea, 325, held in the palace of the Emperor Constantine, who convoked the council. What was his model and what was the model of the people at the council? Here these bishops are coming together here now for the first time. Of course, they'd had these local councils, but I mean, first time together, the model is the Roman Senate. So the model for a council is the Roman Senate and a legislative body. So the councils from Nicaea up to Vatican II are basically judicial and legislative bodies. They issue ordinances, and ordinances often with punishment for non-observance. Behave thus or else, believe thus or else. It's totally absent from Vatican II. Isn't that significant? Indeed, in the council itself, this issue of style was a crucial issue from the very earliest days. What do I want to say here? What is the model for the documents of Vatican II? I mean, they're not ordinances. They're not canons in that sense, a kind of technical term of an ordinance, a law. They are adaptations, wittingly or unwittingly, of a literary genre or literary form from classical antiquity, which is taken up by the fathers of the church, basically panegyrics. They're basically panegyrics. That is to say, they are idealized portraits of what a reality or an office is. The document on bishops, Christus Dominus, what is that? That's an idealized portrait of what a bishop should be. It's holding up an ideal for admiration. And in holding up the bishop for admiration. This is kind of also holding up, the bishop kind of stands for every Christian. It's, you're holding up the certain ideal of the Christian life for admiration. It's a completely different literary genre with a completely different impact on the public. So you've got the genre, and with the genre, you get a whole new vocabulary which runs through those documents. You get a vocabulary now not of authoritarian words, not of punishing words and so forth, not of vertical emphasis, but horizontal, collegiality, cooperation, partnership, words of friendship, words of inclusion, words of looking to the future, words of engagement, not passive obedience, but active engagement in the work of the church and in the work of human society. So out there, getting back to the point I started with, believe it or not, big fight about people saying, look at this line, look at this line, look at this line. Other people saying, no, but you're missing the spirit of Vatican II. Spirit of Vatican II is too vague, but I think you can get at an overriding ideal, an overriding interpretation, an overriding picture by looking at these genres, the new genre, and looking at the vocabulary. Do I make any sense? You can answer that later. Pat?
Since Trent, maybe since before Trent, I think the church has often stood outside of society, and well, maybe since the time of Jesus, the church has stood outside of society and criticized it, despite the fact that it is part of society. Do you think that John the 23rd decided, and maybe others like-minded people with him, that the church had spent too long standing outside culture and criticizing it, and needed instead to find the good things in it and embrace them?
Well, yeah. I mean, after all, we're Christians. We're not of this world. I mean, we're always somewhat outside society. We're always have to have a critical prophetic stance towards society. But at the same time, we believe in the incarnation, so we're also completely embedded in society and so forth. So we have these two tensions. I think what John the 23rd was a trained historian, and I can't verify this as a fact, but I mean, somehow or other, I mean, he seemed to have had the intuition that as he said in the opening allocution of the council, the church now is no longer needs to sort of stand and criticize the world, but to apply the medicine of mercy to the contemporary situation. And see, I think, you mentioned the Council of Trent. I don't think Trent was sort of kind of sailing along, it didn't have an anti-world stand, it didn't have a pro-world stand. It was kind of dealing with the issues it had to deal with. I think to some extent even this is true, you just take Vatican II and its documents. But if you take the history of the papacy itself, from the French Revolutions, the end of the 18th century, up to well into the 20th century, then you do have a kind of a radical anti-modernity stance, therefore anti-world stance. What happened in the French Revolution? Liberty, equality, fraternity. It was the end of the old order. It shook the monarchies, including the papal monarchy. And so you get an ideological definition of modernity in the 19th century, and countering that, you get an ideological definition of anti-modernity, which was incarnated in so many papal pronouncements and papal stance. So I think that's one thing John the 23rd wanted to change, and as a matter of fact, the final document of the council, the church in the modern world. It's not the church for the modern world. It's not the church against the modern world. It's simply the church in the modern world with all the joys and sorrows, all the good things and bad things, and that's what we have to deal with. So I think that was a radical shift in the council, through the council.
Aside from style or from the attitude of the Council to the world, what were the particular issues that prompted the holding of Vatican II? And do you think those issues are still issues for us today?
Well, the issues that prompted the calling of the Council? Mm-hmm. Good luck. I mean, I think this is sort of was buried in the heart of John the 23rd. I mean, that was one of the problems with the convocation of the Council. He wanted to, forget now the precise way he put it, but sort of give joy and comfort to the Christian people and also somehow to reach out to our separated brethren. So it was very vague and very general, and he seemed to believe that with this wonderful gathering, the Holy Spirit would be operative and good things would happen. And I think one thing he hoped to happen would be a more sort of positive attitude towards human progress, human ingenuity and the products of human genius and so forth. But once the Council got going, then for me, I mean, the more I study it, as the Council worked and as the Council operated, I think that the issue under the issues in Vatican II that had different manifestations finally came out to be this issue of center and periphery, or papacy and the rest of the church. And I think you see this tension actually in the Council itself, and you've seen it very strongly after the Council. And it was an issue that the Council did not and perhaps could not resolve. But I think that turns out to be, for me at least, the crucial finding.
Is it yet unresolved? Can you say more about?
Well,
how do we see it
theoretically
today?
It's unresolved. Practically, it's pretty centralized and pretty pretty clear where the power lies. But we can talk about that maybe in the question and answer period. But I mean, the role of Paul VI in the Council, I think, is very revealing in that regard.
We've talked a little bit about Dulles and Oakes. How about Kamanchak and Greeley? They also speak about the Council as an event.
Well, good. This word event, again, for interpreting the Council, in one way that I approach it is through, as I say, taking a look at the literary genre and the vocabulary. And another principal way I go about trying to interpret it is by using this concept of the event. And this is a more or less technical term that's been developed by some French historians and some American sociologists and so forth. And basically one of the things that's going on with the interpretation of Vatican II is it's being reduced to a set of documents. And it's being taken out of the bigger process of its context and its history. So what is an event? An event is a significant happening that has meaning within a larger plot. So, for instance, the American Revolution, in that sense, is an event. It's more than just a lot of battles and a treatise that ended the war. It's a happening that has a bigger meaning because it's in a bigger, longer context. So that's another way I'm trying to approach the Council. So to put the Council is an event in the whole history of the Church. It's an event in the line of the other 20 councils. I mean, how is it like them? How is it different from them? And then it's an event, especially from the late 18th century, the French Revolution, up to the Second World War at least, and then from 1945 up to 1960. For instance, I mean, to give you an example, the council is an event that has to be put in the history of colonialism. How's that? Well, 1945, 1947, 1948, the end of colonialism, the end of European hegemony, supremacy, and the resurgence of the original peoples for their own culture and so forth. This is the use of Latin in the liturgy. I mean, all at once. I mean, Latin is not just is Latin a good thing or a bad thing? It began to stand for colonialism and European in the broad sense, European domination. So just an example of how it has to be put into this larger context. And so I think this concept of event is very useful in getting at Vatican II.
For American Catholics, and as I look about the room here, I think Catholics of many of our generation, those of us who remember a church before Vatican II has some ambivalence. On one hand, we all say that we are now members of the Vatican II Church. We are the people of God. There's that kind of sounds something like the priesthood of all believers as some of us understand it. And on the other hand, we bemoan the fact that American Catholic culture was changed radically with the opening of the doors and windows at Vatican II. Look at religious education, for example. We don't now any longer pass on the truths of Catholicism in the way we did before Vatican II. So for the American church, what do you think? Was it a genuine, wonderful opening of the doors and windows and we're now a Vatican II church, or did we lose something?
We gained and lost. Next question.
Could you elaborate, Father?
No, I mean, first of all, I mean, is it better, is it worse? I mean, good luck. I mean, how will we ever know? What are your criteria? Your criteria are not going to be my criteria, and so on and so forth. Certainly, it's quite different. Is this a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know. That question, it just kind of, I can't deal with it. It's too big for my little brain. I can't quite deal with it. It's certainly different, and the council did not sort of eventuate in sort of the image many of us hoped it might sort of construct it for ourselves, because things never do, right? That law of unintended consequences, bing, it kicks in right away. So I think that's kind of a useless question. I mean, it's useless to try to answer. It's a good question. Sorry.
I'm not offended.
But it's a useless question to try to answer. I mean, because all we can do is do what's in front of us and take the next step. So.
Another thing you hear,
that was pretty clever of me, don't you think? I mean,
either Vatican II was the most wonderful thing that happened to the church or the worst. Is Vatican II dead? Is it over?
Well, I was in Rome. I've been in Rome a couple times in the last couple of years, and a couple of my informants there say, yep, it's dead here. Yeah. At least officially, it's dead. I'm not exactly sure what that means, but I have some sense that it's lost its oomph. Matter of fact, it's a little under suspicion. A little under suspicion. It's certainly not dead anywhere in the church in terms of just what we were talking about, that some of the things that for better or for worse happened, if not as a result of Vatican II, in the wake of Vatican II and after Vatican II, are still very much with us and very much alive and very much moving. I mean, take the most, banal and obvious example maybe is the liturgy. It's quite different. That's presumably not going to change. But I don't know. I mean, I deep down, I have this combination in me of, cynicism and optimism. And I must say that what I understand as the spirit and the ideals of Vatican II, which I see operative in little ways in the Christian communities I know, the Catholic communities I know, I think It is alive, and that is to say, a much more participative, much more horizontal, inclusive, non-authoritarian, although this is not to say that there's not loci of where the buck stops, approach to the Christian reality.
As a layperson, it strikes me that we, as a result of Vatican II, have a great deal more responsibility now to learn about our faith in ways that we used to be told, and now no one is telling us anymore. Do you think that's right? Do lay people now have a greater responsibility to kind of take charge of their own religious experience?
Well, in a sense, that's one of the messages of Vatican II. I think that, in the document on we talk about this document on religious liberty, it's also a document about conscience. And if you will, it's a document about responsibility. And indeed, again, one of those leitmotifs all the way through the council, one of the way getting at its spirit, one of the words that keeps coming up is participation. And the document on the liturgy, crucial. What is the central idea there? It's the full participation of everybody in the liturgy. So we have that old thing, the law of prayer is the law of belief. Well, why not the law of action is the law of belief? We have this law of action that we to participate more. I also think that historically speaking, you may or may not agree with me on this, Pat, but the laity has always been active in the church. It's been active in different ways. And indeed, one interesting thing about councils, the first 8 councils were called by, 7 by a layman and the 8th by a lay woman, the Empress Irene. And until Vatican I, the laity participated actively in every council. Now, the bishops were always the center of it, but they participated actively. But I do think that it was the 19th century when, no matter how active the laity was, in fact, in theory, they were the subjects. And indeed, Gregory the 16th and Pius IX and Pius X referred to them as the subjects of the church. So you had rulers and subjects, and they were the subjects. That's another vocabulary that's missing from Vatican II, and I think gets at this question.
It has always struck me that Vatican II is the first church council that took account, and they will have to from now on, of a completely literate laity. While there was the Emperor Constantine and the Empress Irene before, they were not representative of all lay people. Now we can all participate, those of us who can read and write, which includes most of us in the room.
I think that's true, yeah. I think that it's a whole different quality of lay people. And, again, whatever you think about sort of this horizontal dimension in the church, and this, which I think Vatican II is trying to talk about, it's been a reality in the church, but kind of talk about it, is that regarding the clergy, de facto, the clergy today is not better educated than many, many, many lay people. So no matter what your theory is, the sociological fact is like that. Would you agree?
Absolutely.
I thought you would.